So hi everyone, and welcome to this Hacking the S&P 500 Data webinar. This is in the context of the UBS Quant Hackathon 2020. Welcome everyone. So in this webinar we wanted to cover the first few basic steps to join the platform, to get acquainted with it, and then to get started working on this first competition. This competition is part of the first round of the hackathon, which allows participants to access the second round. So that's a qualification round. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we begin, we will use a few notebooks for this webinar. They will be published under the public notebooks section on your dashboard. We will also have a Q&A session after the presentation. However, as everyone cannot talk at the same time, please type in your questions during the presentation, and then we will reply at the end during the Q&A session. We will also endeavor to reply to most questions. However, we might not be able to do that, so we encourage you to start a new thread on the forum. The forum has been very active over the past few days, so we encourage you to continue that momentum. So this is what we are going to cover today in the webinar. First, we'll just get an overview of the platform and how to use it and how to navigate through it, and then we'll move on to the coding environment. We'll see that there are a couple of constraints when you use the platform, and that's very much by design, and then from there we will move on to how do we retrieve data for this competition, and then how we use data features function in order to basically subset and have a nice visuals around data. Lastly, we will talk about how we create a payout for stock selection, and this is mostly going to be about giving you some hints and some ideas about how to structure this, but we won't be doing any code during that section. So let's get started with the introduction. Most participants should be familiar now with this view. This is the dashboard. From the dashboard you can pretty much navigate through all tools that we have put together so that you can do your research. So let me just jump to that. This is my dashboard at the moment. Obviously you could access the webinar through this panel. You can also access directly to the competition rules, the UBS competition rules, through this event box here on the right with UBS. One of the key parts of the dashboard is this notebook section where you can directly go through the tutorials. You see that there is the Quant Hackathon 2020 first steps for the outperforming the S&P 500, and also in R. So you have both languages, Python and R, that you can access. On the left-hand side is all the menu. So the menu is really key in when you want to navigate. You can find all competitions here. So if you click on Alphathons, you end up here. And here you can see all competitions. So for our purpose here, you have two key pages. One is this one, the UBS Quant Hackathon 2020. And this is key because it's going to help you understanding how we are going to select, amongst other things, participants from the first round to the second round. So I encourage you to read all this section here so that you are sure you understand how we are going to distribute points. So over 3 weeks we will distribute points at the end of each week depending on your ranking and your submissions, and the teams with the most points at the end of the 3 weeks will get through to the second round. So it's really about getting qualified for that second round that you are playing at the moment. So I encourage you to read this, and obviously here it's the specific page of the S&P 500 competition, and you can see the objectives and everything you need to do in there. There's just a reminder, most of you must have by now read these pages, but I encourage you, if anything is unclear, to read them again. The dashboard is quite key, so pivotal to move around, but you have also many ways to find support. So let's just quickly give an overview of what you can do. We've been quite pleased with the activity on the forum, so people tend to ask questions, and we're quite happy about this, and we are endeavoring to answer them as quickly as possible. Obviously you can reply to other participants' questions if you have the answer, that will emulate the competition and make it more interesting. You have the forum, you have the Alphachat that we are actively using to communicate with participants, and then you have a bunch of documentation tools. So let's go quickly through them from the dashboard. You can obviously access the Alphachat from here directly, or you can start a live support ticket here. You can also here under forum access the forum and start a new thread. And lastly, in the research here you have docs where you can have access to the knowledge base and the wiki. Those are two documentation centers. Knowledge base is just a few articles, whereas the wiki is much more dense, goes much more into depth. So I encourage you to start with the knowledge base, which gives you a few first steps, and we will see later on. I'm going to open it now, this page, but we'll come back to that. So that's it for the documentation and support on the website, and this leads us to the research and the coding environment. So now that you know where to find support and you have all the information you need in terms of what you need to do during the competition, you can move on to starting some coding. Now we have a few points about the coding platform that we would like to explain, and this is that basically during this competition we are willing to give every participant the same chance of winning or going through the second round. What does it mean? It means that everyone gets the same hardware and software. You all get 4 gigs of RAM, you all get 2 CPUs, you have the same data and the same libraries. So there is no one that is favored by better hardware or better data quality or better library. Everyone has the same. And why do we do that? It's because we want the winner to be the best strategy or the best model, and not the best hardware or the best at getting data. This is really key for us. We favor equality, and we want just people that are really thinking hard and working through their model to win and to go through. So that's one of our key pillar and our philosophy here. Obviously, we give the choice to you to do that on Python or on R, which you can basically pick depending on how familiar you are with it or how comfortable you are with it. So that's totally discretionary to you, and that will be independent from on our side when we are assessing the strategies. We also wanted to give you some advice, given the constraints that we just described around hardware, notably. And if you have 4 gigs of RAM and only 2 CPUs, you cannot use brute force all the time. So you need to be smart. You need to think of a strategy to get through the data without using too much. And our advice to do that is to work with a small sample of data. Basically, you always work with a small subset of what is available. You don't work with a full data set. You mature your idea, you develop, you test, you try, and once you find something that has a bit of interest, then you start scaling up. You start to add more dimensions. So if you start working with 20 stocks, that's plenty. You can test, you can try. It's going to be much more quicker to compute strategies, for example, or to test your model, and then you will get a much better understanding into what the model is doing. And then once you do what you wanted to do, and the target is well understood, and you know that your model is doing exactly what you wanted to do, then you can scale up. You can, if you have a payout that is using 20 stocks, then it should be just a matter of changing one variable so that instead of using 20 stocks, it uses 50 stocks. But the computation is just going to be longer, but it's not going to change the meaning of the strategy. And that's really key, because if it's the same meaning, then you're saving much time when you're just fine-tuning and doing trial and error on a small sample. So this is really a key message we wanted to get through, and I'll show you later in the coding environment that you can also check if your code is using too much resources, and if there is something that you can maybe optimize there. Last point that I wanted to raise in the coding environment is that we endeavor to document all functions. So you'll see that there are a lot of functions sometimes, and to know how to use them, we have a key tool which is called the QLib. The QLib, you can access it from the research panel here, the quantitative library QLib, and it looks like this. On the left side, basically everything here is a file system. So let me fold everything. This is public, so everything that is under public is a bunch of packages, either in R or in Python. And you can choose if you're not interested in R, or if you're not interested in Python, then you unclick it and you'll see that there is no longer Python. But if you include Python, you see new ones appearing, vice versa. So in this tool, everything that is public, you have a view like this. We'll come back to that, where you can have a wiki page with the documentation, how to use the function, and then you can dig into the code. This is the Python version. You have the R version here, and you can dig directly into the code if you need to. This gives you also quite a good starting point. So rather than starting from scratch, sometimes you just find the function that you like or that is helpful to you. You copy it from the code source here, and then you directly paste it into your IDE and start working from it. So that's quite handy. Obviously, the documentation helps you use the function library here, and that's for the public side of the QLib. You'll see there is also folders with your team names. Here's my team. So everything that I put under my team, it's empty for me, is going to be shared with my team. So everything that you put there, all functions you put in there, your team members can source them from their coding environment. I will emphasize this a bit later. And lastly, you have a folder. Here's my name, Hervé, and everything that I put in there is totally private to me. So all these functions in here, no one can see them except me. I can still source them in my environment, but they're totally private to me. So if you want to cooperate with your team, just put all functions in a team. Here's my team Alphien, where we have functions that we share amongst the team. We'll come back to QLib slightly later, but that's a key tool in order to develop your functions. Last point I can show is that whenever you save a function, which is what I've done here, you have revisions, which is quite nice because all the changes I have made to this particular function are recorded, and so that you remember what you've done and you don't lose any information. So that's quite nice.